If Mike Greenberg was selling this, he would be like, coming up, one of the greatest stories ever told. Get up. So Nick Wright is staying with us, of course, the host of First Things First on Fox Sports 1. What's Right with Nick Wright on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Had a rough weekend. Had a weekend that was worse than Mahomes or Drake, which is saying a lot. So,
first of all, what is this, a Ken Burns documentary? How long are your commercial breaks? My God, I said I'd sit through the break. I didn't know. I mean, my God.
Well.
So here's the benefit of, there's not a lot of benefits of the fact that you're not a listener to the ever-growing and very popular What's Right with Nick Wright podcast, hosted with my son, DeMonze. One of the benefits is you're going to get to hear the story for the first time. Subscribers and listeners got to hear it yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Subscribe on YouTube.
Okay.
All right. Saturday night for the Super Bowl, I'm at one of the many Super Bowl parties.
Of course.
You've met my wife. She's with her best friend. Both beautiful women. As often is the case, whenever we go to like some, nightclub type place, we haven't been in there 5 minutes. And all of a sudden, some group of fellas have been like, hey, we have a section. You guys want to sit here? They're wearing heels. So they're like, yeah. My wife then says to me, do you want to sit? I'm like, no, I'm going to go ahead and not sit in these fellas section who invited you in because you're beautiful and they have no idea we're together. You guys go ahead. I'll have fun. Circle around. UFC fights on a giant screen. So I'm just standing kind of close to the section, watching the UFC fight, having a few cocktails. At some point, after I stood there a while, a woman walks up to me, says, can I ask you a question? Like, of course. Why do you talk so bad about Jalen Hurts? I'm like, well, I don't know that I do. And, I do a little tap dancing. And she's like, no. And she seems to have some very quotables. Some I said, some I didn't. And I'm like, okay, okay. So here are the good things I've said. Here are the critical things I've said. I throw on some of that patented Nick Wright charm, and I figure we're going to be out of here quickly. Not budging an inch. And then I realized something Dan probably would have realized earlier had I not been a couple cocktails in. And I said, ma'am, may I ask you a question? She said, yeah. I said, are you Jalen Hurts' mother? She said, yes, I am. I'm like, God, dog it. I'm like, and I said, well, I'm now in a terrible position. She said, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you're his mom. I'm supposed to right now be like, ma'am, I'm so sorry. Your son's amazing. I'm playing a character on TV. Like, it's my job. Because you're his mom. I was like, however, I don't know if you respect me to begin with, but if I do that, you certainly won't. It's like, so now I feel like I have to say to you why I believe the somewhat negative things I've said about your son as a thrower of the football. And she's like, yes, go ahead. And Dan, when I tell you, I stood there for 15 minutes. Having a conversation about, like, listen, I thought he handled the benching at Alabama incredibly well. I think this. I was like, now, did I call him the weak link of the Eagles offense? I did. However, the context of that is I think they have a top two everything else. I think it's top two quarterback. And she really grilled me. And then I look to my sides and I'm like, I don't know if these are cousins, brothers, uncles, or whatever, but I'm now kind of flanked by what appears to be the Hurts family. And so she says to me at the end, she was like, what are you going to say? She didn't say it harshly. She said, what are you going to say when he wins? And because I'm me and I can't ever stop being me, I'm like, well, if he wins. She's like, no, when he wins. Yeah. And I was like, well, I got to see the game first, but then we'll see. And, it was nice. And I got out of it. I went outside sweating bullets. And I was like, I don't know what just happened, but that's my night before the Super Bowl story, Dan.
Why didn't you have Jalen Hurts' mom on your YouTube podcast?
Invite open.
But that's called good producing right there.
Well, so here, you know what? That opens the door to a second great story, and then I'll let you go.
Is it going to be better than that story?
No chance.
Oh, because that wasn't a great story.
What do you mean?
Okay, let's go around the room. Todd, was that a great story?
I think it was a good story.
All right.
An interesting
Seton.
story.
That's a good story.
All right. Marvin?
Good story.
Yeah. Paulie?
I'm going very good. The tease and then it being the mom and the way he ramped up to it, I'm going very good.
But not great. I was more concerned with your wife and her friend at a table full of guys.
I know. I added that. Now that you've heard the story, totally irrelevant detail, just to make sure you were locked in, buddy. Because I knew I knew that was the Chekhov's gun of the story, except it was never used. I need a better producer. I don't need, that's unfair. I love my producers. But not everybody can have a Fritzy. Fritzy, who texts me mid Super Bowl, knowing what pain I'm in, then post Super Bowl, and then when I defer and I'm like, hey, I can't, he then is like, oh, that's interesting because I see another show is promoting an upcoming appearance you're having. And I'm like, well, that other show is the TV show on the network that pays me. So, yes, as much as I love Dan, I do have to do that, and then I'll come on. Fritzy's a bulldog, man.
All of that is very true.
Thinking, am I lying?
He's done that before to people who have lost, had emotional losses, but before the game is over, when you think you're going to win, and he'll say, hey, when you win, we want to have you on, and then they lose in dramatic fashion. So, Fritzy, it's not just you, Nick, but you're right. I tell him to go get people, and he goes and gets people.
Well, I kind of finally saw the sausage was made. I always was, it was always amazing to me before we even knew each other. I'm like, man, I know people really like and respect Dan Patrick, but he gets all of the guests you'd want the day you want them. And it turns out it's because you employ a psychopath.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, that is true. That is fair. That is fair. So the other story that
was it.
Oh, that was the story.
Fritzy.
Oh, okay.
That was a great story. That one you guys will like because it's
but that's a story we've heard many, many times from different people here. Seton, you had something to say to Nick?
Oh, well, yeah, I was going to say about Nick's story, it was a solid move, including the bit about your wife and the table, because not only did you reinforce that your wife is beautiful, but also you just proved that you're supremely confident. Like, nah, babe, go ahead. You go sit. I'm good. Don't worry about it. I'm going to go walk around. You go have fun. I'll see you later. Don't worry about it. That's a solid flex.
Oh, well, thanks. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, that too. How about that?
Babe,
solid enough flex.
Go ahead, have fun. You're gorgeous. Go enjoy yourself. Don't worry about it. See you at the end of the night.
You ever walked into a room, been in a room with Nick when he walks in? I mean, he's not suffering from insecurity. Just saying. Maybe he should, but I'm just saying, when he walks in
like Ric Flair.
Yeah, it's like, hey, easy here, dude. Wow, that's a bright red coat.
I knew you were going to bring up the coat.
Yeah,
I knew you were going to bring up the coat. And
did you get your coat from that restaurant yet?
The gun club you took me to? No, I didn't. I've never been back.
That coat is still okay. All right, I'll get it, and I'll take it to my apartment.
That's gone. That was a year and a half ago.
There's nobody that's going to take that coat, Nick.
Oh,
nobody can wear that coat.
I wasn't. That's not the orange coat. The orange coat I would have gotten. That was because you mocked the orange coat so badly. I wore a much more conservative,
subdued.
I think it's called camel coat, and I left it. I'll see you, man.
How much money did you lose on Sunday?
It's less about how much I lost and more about what I would have won. Because I actually didn't have to bet the game directly because it is complex. I'm in a gambling consortium where we trade futures like stocks. So I had basically a downside risk of less than $10,000 if the Chiefs lost and an upside of just north of 70 if they won. And a lot of people then would have just bet 30 on the Eagles and lock in a big profit. But there's a name for those people. They're called cowards. And so I just let it ride.
Keep your head up. Keep your head up. As I told you Sunday night, keep your head up.